Alright, welcome back to the fourth and final part. Let's get started. First we have Triggerman, another mediocre bond card. Not constructed, playable really, but in limited this might be decent. We get a 5-cost 3/3 quick draw, which is not even that terrible if you don't get to bond it, but with bond it can give you some nice tempo boost potentially. And when Triggerman attacks while wielding a weapon, he has +2 attack, so he's a pretty good weapon carrier. Once you put, say, an ornate katana on him, he is a 5/3 quick draw, and when he attacks he's a 7/3 quick draw, which makes him really hard to take down in combat with anything. So in limited he looks quite decent if you have a couple of gunslingers to have a shot at bonding him out on the cheap, and some weapons to abuse his ability and a quick draw. Next we have Umbran Coaxer, once again no constructed card, 5/2, lifesteal for 5, not great, 2 health on high drop units is a pretty big downside, makes them super fragile if they don't have any evasion especially. So yeah, underwhelming filler material I would say. Next we have Drifting Death. So this girl is pretty overcosted. It's a Valkyrie, that's a nice bonus that can be relevant, but a 3/2 flying lifesteal for 6 is just not that great, even by limited standards. And the Entomb drawing a curse from your void is somewhat situational and marginal, that I don't think it's worth that much. So I would say the card is at least a power too expensive. But it can still make it into your deck if you need another Valkyrie. And I mean, a lifesteal flyer, you have some weapons, is always a nice vehicle, but the card is underwhelming. Then we have Finback Commonet, another shadow dinosaur, a pretty weak one at that. You may discard a card to make Nightfall, so you're basically throwing away a card to draw an extra card and give your opponent an extra card. Sounds like a pretty terrible deal, even if you maybe get something else out of the Nightfall. So yeah, this is mostly just a 6-cost 5/5 dinosaur, which is pretty underwhelming even limited, but it is not entirely unplayable, especially if you sometimes really get something powerful out of that Nightfall trigger. So having the option for free, since you can just not use it, is worth something sometimes. Then we have Gun Rustler, another pretty underwhelming card. A 4/2 for 6 is super fragile, and stealing all weapons from an enemy unit and putting them on Gun Rustler. Like, how much do you expect to get? Like, the fact that it only steals it from one unit makes it so much worse even. Like, realistically, their best unit has 1 to 2 weapons, and the decks that have weapons are often like aggressive decks with weapons with a lot of attack and little health, making this then often a super low health 6-drop with a bunch of weapons that still dies to anything and anyone. The card is just not good in either format really. I'm just, yeah, a bit baffled by this card. Once again, way too conservative with the effect to cost ratio, even for limited I think. Such a situational effect, yeah. Then we have Malediction Reader, a 6-cost 5/5 flyer that when you play a curse drains the enemy player for 2. I think in constructed this is at least 1 power too expensive. I mean, we have Impending Doom at 4 with a minor downside. Here we have Impending Doom with sort of a situational but nice upside, and suddenly it costs 2 more. That makes no sense. Like, the card should cost 5 and then it would be at least interesting for constructed. This way it's just not constructed relevant at all, but in limited a 6-cost 5/5 flyer with potential upside is pretty powerful, so pick on sight usually in limited. Then we have Solitude, another one of these weird, bad legendaries that we talked about in the spoiler season. The enemy player discards the top card of their deck for each card in their void, so you double the size of their void effectively. And yeah, there's just not enough mill in the game to make this sort of like a considerable finisher for a mill control deck, for example, making this card basically 800 dust every time you see it, if you ask me. And in limited, you can literally pick any card over this. Actually, I might be wrong here. In limited, the deck size is small enough that if you can get the opponent into like a slow and grindy game, this can finish them. But you should probably usually find better ways of finishing your opponent than an otherwise useless situational card like Solitude. But it might happen. Then we have Zelia the Vain, one of the fewer pretty sweet bond cards. First of all, a 4/4 deadly. 4/6 is not horrible if it really comes to that. But there's also Rindra, which is a 4-cost 5/5 unseen, so you can easily on 5 power go Rindra, bond Zelia the same turn, for example. That is a pretty powerful turn. And the ability is not an ultimate, not limited to once per turn, and also doesn't exhaust Zelia to use it. And then putting -2, -1 curses for every 4 power that you have on any opposing unit, and at the same time permanently buffing Zelia by +2, +1 is pretty powerful. So all in all, this is a potential powerhouse if you can find the right deck around her, because she has all the right things going on for a constructed staple. And in limited, this is a stone cold bomb. You need 0 unseen in your deck to play this and make this break the game and win it for you easily. You just need to stall out a bit and let her ability just cripple the entire opposing board and build her into a monster. Then we have Dangerous Bargain, and how dangerous that bargain is, since first of all we have that dreaded Nightfall again, then it's a 7-cost curse, and once night ends the card loses all effect. So you have to constantly keep up night, and then you get a pretty expensive 7-cost control magic, stealing the best opposing enemy unit at the time. And I think the effect is just too expensive for how conditional it is. In limited, it's a bit better, since it's a pretty swingy effect, but only if you have enough Nightfall to at least keep this up for a couple of turns, so it either beats the opponent or the opponent is forced to trade with his own unit before night finally comes to an end. So it's a pretty risky and situational card even in limited. Next we have Repulsive Gorger, another new Shadow dinosaur. Shadow is trying to like get in on the dinosaur game more and more, but once again another kind of constructed underwhelming dinosaur. First of all, 4 health on a 7-drop is really not what you want normally. And then on summon you can sacrifice another unit to give each enemy unit -1, -1. So you basically can turn one of your lesser units into a plague, which is nice but not great, and a 7/4 for 7 is just not good enough with that bonus attached. I think it would need a bit better to be good. In constructed it's already too expensive anyway, but even in limited I think this is a bit so-so. It's probably gonna be an okay 7-drop, but it's nothing to be super excited about, since it might just be a vanilla 7-cost 7/4, which is pretty bad. Then we have Encroaching Darkness, triple shadow 8-cost legendary relic. On summon it makes night fall, and then it makes sure night never ends. So I guess there might be like a potential synergy deck with like dangerous bargains and encroaching darkness, but putting 2 bad cards in a deck to make a good card does not sound like the best plan. And sure, the fact that the cursed player takes your night damage, so they basically take 2 and you take 0, is still not worth it. Like, you skip your entire 8th turn just to make nightfall and have night never end. That's just like time walking yourself, and nightfall is such a 2-edged sword in a deck that wants to drop an 8-drop like this. You really don't want both players to draw 2 cards and so on and so forth. Yeah, there's just so many things wrong with this. And in limited, please don't touch this, usually. Then we have Nametaker, also discussed during the spoiler season. I don't get why this is only a 6/4, given that it costs 8, and that the text is pretty situational and speculative value. Sure, the unit doesn't have to die to Nametaker. You can also kill them in combat with trading and with removal spells to thin your opponent's deck of threats, but it's just so situational, and you have to put a weak 8-drop weapon in your deck to make this happen. So yeah, meh, in both formats. Like, 8-drops need to be better in limited even to like be in your deck. Okay, next we have Valkyrie Harvester. Card is kind of cool, but probably a bit underwhelming in the end. We get a 6/5 flying for 8, which is a bit understated, I would say, but we get kind of a cool summon effect. You draw each unit that died this turn and they get flying and become Valkyries. So you get to draw a bunch of cards basically after you attacked and traded stuff in combat. The way it's worded, it means you probably also draw destiny cards off the top of the enemy player's deck that were put there by revenge this turn, for example. Or like destiny units in play that died is also a nice thing to draw. Problem is, 6/5 flying for 8 is just not impactful enough, and the value is pretty speculative and slow because you have to play all the things. But it does some cool stuff, but I think in constructed it's just a bit too specific and slow in there. And it competes with cards like Varas, which it can't really compete with, I think, usually. In limited, this is the kind of 8-drop that you can happily put in your draft deck, because a lot of the time it will be able to just win you the game, which is what your 8-drop has to do in draft. And last of the shadow cards is Callis Survivalist, another bond card, another bond gunslinger. We get Warcry on a 9-cost 5/4, which is basically worth nothing, since, I mean, when do you expect to get this guy out? Maybe, only maybe, on like turn 5, like turn 4. Usually doesn't seem realistic, but turn 5 is pretty realistic. But turn 5 is not the time where Warcry is very valuable anymore. I rather wish that guy would have a bit more defensive stats, like being a 5/6 for example, at 9 cost, and not have Warcry would be much nicer. But the ability is pretty cool. If you bond him, although it's one that only works on bond, if you bond him, you get to double sabotage the opponent. Or rather, not quite sabotage, because you only get to pick spells, not attachments. So it's a limited double sabotage. The problem is, it might take a while till you get him out, and then a lot of decks won't have 2 spells in hand anymore. So this is a highly situational sideboard card, for the most part. But it can be a pretty strong sideboard card in decks that can support it against spell-heavy control decks, because it is a pretty strong 3/1 if it hits with both discards. But yeah, and in limited, I mean, if you have enough ways to bond this, you might want to put it in your deck, because it's still a decent body. But I think in limited, a lot of the time it will be too hard to support and too much work for too little return. So I would probably, when in doubt, not put it in my draft deck, but I could be wrong. Alright, that concludes the 5th faction, the shadow part of the review. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned a thing or two as usual. If you did, please don't forget to like down below and subscribe for more content in the future. Turn on the notification icon to not miss anything. Speaking of future content, I will do one more review series for the remaining multi-faction and colorless cards, and then we are through with discussing the Dusk Road and can focus on more deck techs again. Thanks for watching, everyone. This is Manu S, and I'm out. Bye.